Hi everybody, happy new year and welcome to Shiver Speaks. Before we get into all of the excitement of 2025, let's do a quick recap of 2024. Today we are talking about all horror movies that have come out in 2024, starting with January and ending on now, most recent movies that have come out. There are 29 movies on this list, and just for the sake of it, we are only going to talk about those that have hit actual theaters. So this does not include any that have only come out on streaming services. So for our first movie, the first horror movie of 2024, that was Night Swim. That came out last January 2024, and it was a bit of a doozy. It was a not so great start to 2024 for horror movies. From the Shivers review, we gave it a 2.8 out of 5. For Rotten Tomatoes, that movie got a 20%. This movie was adapted by a small film, short film, and I believe it should have just stayed as a short film. There's no reason that this needed to be a full-length feature film. The cast, they did a great job with a terrible story. There's only so much you can do about a story that involves a haunted pool in your backyard. So let me know your thoughts in the comments of this movie, of all of the movies that we talk about today. But Night Swim in particular, I believe, is just one of those that should have just stayed as a nice short film, a good creepy movie about the fears of summertime, the fears of a pool party gone wrong, essentially, but not a really great start to the year. Next up, we had Lisa Frankenstein. This is one that I did not see, but I heard a lot of people enjoyed it. Very similar vibes to Warm Bodies from back in the day. This received a 52% on Rotten Tomatoes. So certainly not as bad as Night Swim, certainly not up there with some of the greats, just a nice, easy middle ground. This one had Cole Sprouse in it, and he did a really great job. He and the main character had a lot of great chemistry on and off the screen. So this is just one of those feel-good ones that came out around Valentine's Day and really brings good energy, good vibes. Next is Imaginary. This is my least favorite film of the entire year. This I gave a 2.6 out of 5. I have to go as far as saying one of my least favorite horror films and movies in general. This is a Blumhouse movie. This got a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes. So other people agree as well. And for the sake of clarification as well, these are just the critic score. This is not the audience score. But 24% on Rotten Tomatoes is what Imaginary got. This is a Blumhouse movie, another feature film, another big ticket type of film. And the story is just not there. It takes pieces of Chucky, pieces of Be Careful What You Wish For themes, pieces of all of these different things, and puts them together. It is, I believe, such a missed opportunity to turn this into something that could be a spooky kids movie, but just makes it kind of dumb. So Imaginary falls short. The next one on the list is Immaculate. I gave it a 3.9 out of 5. I think that Immaculate is a pretty good movie. This got 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is starring Sydney Sweeney. We'll get to The First Omen in a second, but for Immaculate and The First Omen to be out and released back to back, I think really did both of these movies a disservice. You could watch one and understand the entire story of the other one, basically. I would give a slight edge to Immaculate, only because this is very much the fears of Americans going overseas, Americans being disliked, very much a hostile feeling in terms of movie tension, vibe, atmosphere. But where Immaculate falls short is that we still have Sydney Sweeney as the star. And because she herself is so sexualized, her being a nun takes a lot away from the actual story, takes a lot away from the actual like nunnery of it, the classic conformity that nuns have to go through in all of their training process and everything. And it just, you know, here's a hot girl stuck in a nunnery, and now she's of course the one who's picked to carry this burden of the devil. I really love the ending of this one. I think that the ending of Immaculate is immaculate. It is great. But the rest of the movie itself, I would have liked a different star. I would have liked a little bit of a more of a commitment to the horror rather than the personality of these people and the personality of the actual actors that shine through. The reason why I would give it a little bit of an edge over The First Omen is because it does stand alone. And the next movie that came out after Immaculate was The First Omen. So it does feel a little bit like they're ripping off each other. I did like The First Omen. I gave this also a 3.9 out of 5. Both of them have the same score. For Rotten Tomatoes, The First Omen has an 83%, so it is a bit higher than Immaculate. I believe that this is the case because it is bringing a horror classic back to modern audiences. So we're going back to The Omen, we're going back to Damien, we're following all the rules of that classic film. And so that is a bit of nostalgia in and of itself, which is really nice to see. But The First Omen, there are bits and pieces that make it feel really silly. There are timelines in that movie that don't necessarily add up. I think that the main character does a really great job of trying to feel her way out, trying to figure out why she is so castrated really in this society, in this nunnery as well, and dealing with all of the hate and appropriation as well from all of these men who are in the priesthood side of things. So The First Omen has a lot more to think about, has a lot more background to it, but I would give the storyline and the actual horror a little bit of an edge for Immaculate. The next movie that came out after this was Sting. This just popped up on Hulu a couple of weeks ago. Looks really silly. It is a horror movie about a spider that basically just grows to this enormous size. It is one of those over the top, feels like classic horror vibes. Feels a little bit under budget. Feels a little bit like a cheesy horror movie, but it gets 70% on Rotten Tomatoes. So whether or not spiders are your thing, monster movies are really your thing, this is a unique one that kind of kicked off earlier in the year. After this, we had Abigail. Abigail is on my list to watch sometime soon. It does seem like it will be up my alley, but I have not seen it yet. It did, however, get 83% on Rotten Tomatoes, and many people like this movie. This is the story about the little girl who's a ballerina who has all of these people come and babysit her for a night at this insane cost. And the commercials make it look really dumb. Like she is this zombie vampire ballerina who is possessing and basically taking victim all of these people who are in her path at night. But the real hide and go seek, ready or not experience of it makes it very suspenseful and makes it feel like one of those horror movies that I really enjoy. So more to come on Abigail, but let me know your thoughts on that one in particular if you have seen it. Next up is Back Down. So we started the year with some crappy movies. We got a couple really good ones in between. Now we're back on a lull. So next up is I Saw the TV Glow. This is on Max right now. This is an A24 horror movie. So I will put it out there right now that my expectation for A24 horror movies is pretty low whenever I see them. I'm not an A24 fan, but I Saw the TV Glow got 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. I didn't like it. This is I would give it a 2.8 out of 5. I didn't even bother doing an actual review on it because I just don't want to come across as an A24 hater all of the time. But this is one of those movies that you feel like you need to be high to watch it. And the premise and the actual storyline of it is kind of flat. It is really all about just these teenagers watching this new TV show and what that really looks like from the outside perspective of the obsession over binge watching culture. So from a deeper message, I do like that. I do understand why it is 84% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is very artsy. It is the fear of essentially TV taking people's personality, taking people's opinions, and running with them. But for the actual story, for the actual watching aspect of it, it's not great. And it's not the easiest to follow either, even though the story is so simple. So use your judgment on that one. Next up is Tarot. I enjoyed Tarot. We gave it a 3.6 out of 5. Many people did not. This got a 17% on Rotten Tomatoes and is the lowest scored horror movie of 2024. Tarot is very old school 2000s type of horror movie, so pretty much the era that is not liked the most. But I really didn't mind it. I think that there were parts that the rules didn't add up, and so I wish that there was more flushing out of the actual storyline of the expectations of each of these characters, because one person follows the rules and the next person doesn't, and both of them are in trouble, or the opposite. So more consistency is what I would love to see out of Tarot, but I did still find it enjoyable. And also the acting in this movie does kill it a little bit. The acting is not top notch. I'm surprised that this has become such a topic of conversation. Watching it and rating it, I thought it was fine. I thought it was relatively enjoyable. Everybody who I talked to who was a horror fan after watching that movie says, this is such a trash movie, this is the worst movie of the year, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think it elicits that many opinions, but evidently it does. Next up is another relatively crappy one. This is The Strangers Chapter 1. This stars Madeline Pilch. She's also in Riverdale, but this movie got a 21% on Rotten Tomatoes. I would give it a 2.8 out of 5. I'm not a big fan of the Strangers series. I wish there was more. I understand the actual content behind it of we are in a house and anything can happen, and there's nothing personal to somebody robbing your house. You know, why is this happening? Well, it's because you're here. So that I understand that level of it doesn't matter who you are, you can be targeted, you can be a victim, whatever happens can happen to you. That I appreciate the storyline for. What I don't appreciate is a 2-hour-long, drawn-out, drone footage type film of these people having a break-in on a vacation. It's not really necessary. And nothing in The Strangers Chapter 1 explains really any of these characters, explains some of the background of why we keep getting stranger movies, but I'm not alone in this opinion. So that is The Strangers. After that, we have The Watchers. This I gave a 3 out of 5 for our Shiver scale. It's got a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I think this was one of those movies that had certainly had false advertising. I went into it with really high expectations of this trippy woodland setting and things going really interesting in the woods. You get stuck there, you have to figure out how to get back. All of these things happen at night. It's very creepy. This ended up being more of a creature feature where there are rules that need to be followed. There are tricks and tricksters and folklore pieces. So I do like the pull of all of these different elements. However, the story does fall pretty flat. And for pieces of it to be supernatural, when really it just more looks like missing persons and what their perspective looks like, I would have preferred it to be a little bit more rooted in reality. So, or have the actual advertising and expectations a little bit different before going to see the movie. So after that, we have The Exorcism. This starred Russell Crowe. Kind of fell under the radar. I honestly forgot that it came out this year. It feels like it came out a couple of years ago. But this got 27% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is yet another exorcism movie, this from the perspective of the priest. So what's there really left to say about more and more of these exorcism movies that are coming out that are really focused on a setting in the church? Not much else that can be said about it. It's been overdone, I think, this year especially, but a lot of people are sort of falling into that genre, especially because of the I would say, eventual collapse of the Catholic faith and the religion as what it has been all of these years. So I think that there is a need and a desire to see some of these exorcism movies. I just wish that they would become a little bit more creative. So, next up is A Quiet Place Day One. This is one of my favorite horror movies of this year. Gave it a 4 out of 5. This got an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. It feels like a big movie. It has a big cast, big stars, big effects, big emotions. This is definitely the most emotional horror movie of the year. I really, really, really enjoyed this. I'm a big fan of the Quiet Place series in general. I do like this one the best out of all of them so far. I think that this is just not really a horror movie, so if anything, I would knock it a little bit for being not really scary, more emotional. But I do still think that this is a good one for anybody. And even though I believe it's rated R, this is a movie that I would show to a 10-year-old. There's some gore and of course some violence, but it feels in general more like an action movie. Feels certainly more along the lines of like I Am Legend than it does a gory apocalypse zombie type movie. So I really am a big fan of this movie. I would put it near the top. Next up is Maxine. Another one. So as you're starting to see some of these trends, we started out kind of crappy, got a little bit better, went really crappy, now we're getting really good. Maxine. As much as I just said, not a fan of A24 horror movies. The whole Pearl, X, and Maxine series, that trilogy, I love them. I absolutely love them. This was the first year that I watched Pearl, and after that watched Max and X, and then I watched Maxine. I really, really, really love Maxine. I would give it 4.5 out of 5. This has a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. I am a big fan of movies that are rooted in reality. There is no element of supernatural. There is no element of the ether. There is nothing that is otherworldly. This is what is the price of fame, and what am I willing to do to get it? What am I willing to do to accept the life that I do deserve? I can relate to Maxine. I think many, many, many people can relate to Maxine. And many people can relate to her father, who wants to protect her from a lifestyle of, I am literally willing to do anything it takes to become famous, to get my name out there. The ending, having her actually made it in this fever dream sort of state, is also just such a satisfying ending. I am a big fan of Maxine. I really, really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed all three, but I like Maxine the best. Next up is Longlegs, a very, very, very highly talked about movie of the year. Longlegs for me got a 4 out of 5. I would even knock it a little bit, maybe 3.9, 3.8 out of 5. It is very original. I do like that. This got an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. A lot of people like it. A lot of people like Longlegs. It is something different than what we have seen before. However, many of the elements that we see in the movie seem to be borrowed from The Black Phone. And I will defend Sinister and The Black Phone and those type of movies forever and ever and ever. Those are my absolute favorites. So seeing some of those borrowed elements made me feel a little defensive for the movies that have come before. Again, kind of going back to what I was literally just saying of having movies being rooted in reality, having these stories being rooted in reality. I would have much preferred if Longlegs stuck to how it sort of started, with having our main character, the FBI agent, have these sort of psychic visions, and having it be that supernatural element because of this like intuition and this psychicness, but having it pivot completely and turning it into this satanic need for blood mixed with the possession of these dolls became a little far-fetched for me. I love the twists in it. I love the fact that, spoiler alert, the FBI agent's mother was really the one kind of carrying all of this out. I do think that Nicolas Cage did a great job in this movie. I think that all of the elements were there. I just need a little bit refinement from it for it to really knock my socks off. So is this a movie that I'm necessarily going to recommend to people? No. Is it something that I would say people could watch, should watch? Sure. It's not bad. It's not great. I don't think in 10 years from now it's a movie that we're going to be talking about, but it is something that is different. So I'll give credit where credit is due. Next up, we have Trap. Now we're starting to go back down again. Trap, for me, got a 3 out of 5. This is another M. Night Shyamalan movie. This got 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is about a man and his daughter going to a concert, and he is a serial killer. So he's doing everything he can to evade the cops, to be this very manipulative, successful man who is escaping all of these people. It is a good view of a movie that is suspenseful and that is thriller. Another one that I absolutely would not consider a horror movie whatsoever. I think that it is suspenseful, it is a thriller, it is honestly good for all ages as well. I would like this to be a little bit more fleshed out with the rules as well. I think that the main character did a really great job of portraying himself as manipulative, as sly, as sneaky, but another spoiler alert for his wife to know that he's been doing these killings all of this time and not really do anything about that. I think that that is what really kills Trap for me a little bit. Next up, we have Cuckoo. This came out in the fall, I want to say around September. This is now streaming on Hulu. I would give this also a 3 out of 5. For Rotten Tomatoes, this gets a 78%. This is very different than any other movie that I've really seen before. It is set in Germany, it's in Europe, and you really have to have subtitles on for this movie because there is so much background whispering and dialogue and conversation. It doesn't make it very easy to follow. But it's a really good movie of following the main character and understanding how scary it can be when nobody believes you, nobody hears you. It does give a bit of a Rosemary's Baby vibe, minus said baby, but it's a cool movie. It is cool. It is different. It is unique. It is definitely original. I don't love it by any stretch. There are certainly elements of the supernatural in there that I am not 100% akin to, but it is different. So if you want something that is different, if you want something that feels a little bit like Funny Games in a way, mixed with Rosemary's Baby, then this is the vibe for you for sure. Next up is Alien Romulus. I was iffy on adding this to the list in the first place. I don't really think the Alien movies belong in the horror genre. I'm not a sci-fi person, but many people love the Alien genre. This is a movie I have not seen. It is 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. Many people were saying that it is nice to see a revive of the Alien movies, a new version for a modern audience. I don't really have an opinion. I'm a little bit of a sci-fi hater, but I do know I can give credit where credit is due. This is a movie that is interesting to have come out this year, and many people who are a fan of the genre, a fan of the series, a fan of the franchise, loved this movie. So that is what I have heard. I don't really necessarily have any personal ties to it. Next up, we have Blink Twice. Another one I think had certainly false advertising. I would give this one a 3 out of 5, and it has 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. A star-studded cast, a great filmed movie, but one that is very hard not to fall asleep in the middle of. I watched it twice, and both times fell asleep. It's a cool movie in terms of having a different expectation on celebrities and how they're possibly using people for their own benefit. I really do like the ending of this one. It's not entirely satisfying, but it is unique. So I would give the ending really the reigning reason why to watch Blink Twice. Again, it is very different than what I expected. I expected that these girls would be invited to Channing Tatum's island and just have a good time, and it would be some and then there were none type of vibe to it. But this is more along the lines of male versus female, celebrities versus the regular people, and then everything in between. So I do like that. I like that it is more psychological. I do like that there are no real supernatural elements to it. It is trying to figure out what is going on this entire time. This is a true rated R movie, so this is not for really anybody who is young, but it's unique. I'll give it the edge for being unique. Not bad, not great. Wouldn't recommend it. Wouldn't really watch it again, but it is different. Next up, we have Beetlejuice 2. I would give this a 4.8 out of 5. I really loved it. This is a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is a Tim Burton film, the next in the Beetlejuice series, franchise, whatever you want to call it. I loved it. I thought that it was really creative. I thought that it was really fun watch. I thought it was a great Halloween time addition. Many people were not a big fan of it because it did not follow Beetlejuice to a T. It didn't really pull from Beetlejuice 1 other than just like the setting and Beetlejuice himself. But I thought that it is a wonderful modern iteration of it. I love the fact that Lydia has this podcast and is on TV and is sort of selling herself as this supernatural person. I think that that is so real and so true, and then it's not until all of these things get proven that the supernatural exists and all of these things exist. So I think that it is a very fun take on Beetlejuice, on the supernatural, on ghosts and spooky things like that. Again, many people might not really call it horror. I wouldn't necessarily call it horror, but it is gothic comedy, if nothing else. But I absolutely loved it. I think it'll be a regular Halloween time watch for me. After this, we have Speak No Evil. This got an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. This is a remake of the original, but Speak No Evil, I have heard mixed reviews. I have not yet seen it. I think that it is spooky. It has a good cast. It has a good story. It is very dark. It is very heavy. So this is not just a Saturday afternoon cleaning in the background type of movie. So buckle in if you want to watch Speak No Evil. Next up is The Substance. This got 90% on Rotten Tomatoes and is a phenomenal movie. This is the first body horror movie that we've gotten in a very long time and is done superbly. It is a very well done movie. It is a very well done story. It is all about the price of beauty. We have Maxine that kind of talks about the price of fame, whereas now The Substance talks about the price of beauty. So I really like these parallels of these celebrities that are kind of jumping on the bandwagon of saying, yeah, why are we getting Botox? Why are we putting all of this emphasis on being young when we can't stop aging? That doesn't stop. So I think The Substance is a great poke at Hollywood, at the world at large, and many, many, many people would agree as well. Next up, we have Salem's Lot. I know I said I wasn't going to include any streaming movies on here, but this one I did because it's Stephen King. This I would give a 3.2 out of 5. This did get 45% on Rotten Tomatoes. I do think that this is a good vampire movie. I watched it, didn't mind it, didn't love it. I thought that this was much more emotional than I expected, much sadder than I expected, especially the ending. Very, very, very sad. Not really scary. There's a couple of really good jump scares in there. It does take a lot of authenticity from the Stephen King stories, but nonetheless, unless you feel like crying, this is one of the rare horror movies that you'll cry at. It's okay. Next up, we have Terrifier 3. I have my own opinions on Terrifier series, on the franchise. I would give Terrifier 3 a 2.5 out of 5. This is the second lowest movie that I've rated this year and has given me a lot of hate. Many people understand my perspective on horror movies. I think even you guys listening understand my perspective on horror movies. I like things that have rules. I like things that make sense. I like things that make you think. Terrifier does not make you think, does not make you question why people are doing what they're doing. it does not follow its own rules, and it has 78% on Rotten Tomatoes. Terrifier, as in general, and Art the Clown, is bringing back very old style horror movies, bringing back very old gore to an audience that just wants more and more and more. That I appreciate it for. I appreciate the gore. I am a big fan of gore in horror movies. I don't think it's really necessary. I don't think it's kind of like do one or the other. Either have a horror movie that is all about gore, that is just this tchotchke version of a clown that is haunting a family, and just gore it up, or have the story of this mime clown who doesn't speak that we can sort of analyze and build off the rules that he is this supernatural being that only comes out on Halloween. Now we have Terrifier 3, who follows Art the Clown, who is outside of Halloween, still essentially haunting this same girl and this same family, but still doesn't die, still is alive, still is around. Like, it doesn't add up. So I could talk about this for a long time. I know that I am in the minority, especially of classic horror movie fans. I will give Art the Clown all of the respect that he does deserve as being a unique and new face to classic horror. I just don't think that it should get the attention that it is getting. Next up, we have Smile 2. This got 86% on Rotten Tomatoes and does follow similar vibe to The Substance and Maxine. I love the idea of these celebrities thinking that they are untouchable, and then they become not untouchable. People in general, not just celebrities. So this is where this movie really shines, and it does have rules and it does follow them. So I have really grown to become a Smile fan. I was iffy on the first one, but after rewatching the first and the second back to back, I like them. I would say I like them, and I would say I would recommend them. Next up, we have Heretic. This gets a 5 out of 5 for me. And thankfully, this is also the highest rated horror movie of this year at 91%. Heretic is in my top 3 favorite movies of all time now. I went to the movies and I bawled my eyes out because I loved it so much. I love Heretic. I love this movie. I love everything about it. I would change very, very small things about it. But the fact that we are talking about religion, a topic that I talk about all the time, in essence of what are you willing to do to survive? Is your God going to save you? Or are you here to save yourself? What are we going to do about it? And seeing how people act, seeing how people survive and how they actually do, with the expectation and the planning behind it, there's nothing else I can say. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. And if you don't like it, please, please, please tell me why. Please tell me why. The last 2 movies we have for the year, we have Y2K, which came out just a couple weeks ago. That has a 43% on Rotten Tomatoes. I honestly don't know too much about it other than the fact that this movie is set in the year 2000 and takes it from the perspective of what would happen if computers actually came to life in the year 2000 and killed everybody. So it is a funny horror movie in that regard. But outside of that, I really haven't heard much about it, and I haven't had the chance to go see it. So view at your discretion. And the very last one on our list that came out on Christmas last week is Nosferatu. This is at 87%. This is a classic gothic love story. This is a vampire movie for the ages. Great acting, great background to this movie, and everything in between makes it one of the good ones. I wish that it didn't come out on Christmas. I do think that it is more of a snowed in type of movie, snowed in vibe, but nonetheless, it's a new classic for sure. And they did a really great job of bringing Nosferatu back to life in a very tasteful way. So those are all of the movies from 2024. Let me know what some of your favorites are, some of them that you didn't like, some of them that you did like, what you're looking forward to for 2025. I will tell you that Shivers gets to see Wolfman, that comes out on January 17th, a little bit early on January 14th, which is really exciting. But stay tuned, that will be our first horror movie review of the year, and that is going to be made and revived by Leigh Whannell, who is the creator of Saw. So I'm extremely excited about that. But yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you so much for your support over 2024, and hope you follow us into 2025. All new fun things to come. Thanks, guys. Have a great new year.